Hey guys, I've always been jealous over Proverbs chapter 31. You know, the women have a whole chapter in the Bible dedicated to what it means to be a godly woman, but we've got nothing. Until I read a book that revealed to me that Job chapter 29 is the Proverbs 31 for men. Today I'm going to share with you the 9 marks of a man from Job chapter 29. So here's the meat of the podcast, guys. I want to share with you, I've never done this before. I've written a lot on this subject. We actually have a 9-week study in the Men's Ministry Playbook about Job chapter 29, but I want to unpack each of these 9 and the reference to it in Scripture so you can see that I didn't just pull this out of thin air. So in Job chapter 29, remember, a lot has happened in Job's life by Job chapter 29. In Job chapter 29, verse 2, Job laments, "Oh, that I were as in the months gone by, as the days when God watched over me, when his lamp shone over my head, and by his light I walked through the darkness." This is Job chapter 29, verse 2 and 3. The first aspect of a marked man for God in Job 29 is this man is a God hunter. In other words, he's a pursuer of God. In Matthew chapter 6, verse 33, Jesus said, "Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. All these things will be added unto you as well." In Philippians chapter 3, verses 12 and 14, Paul says, "Forgetting what is behind, I press on." This word press on is the Greek word dioko. It means to hunt or to chase after. What Job is saying to men is the most important thing we can do in life is pursue God. This leads us to the second thing, which is found in verse 4. In verse 4, Job reflects and says, "As I was in the prime of my days, when the friendship of God was over my tent." This is what I want to share with you about the Job 29 marked man of God. He is a storyteller. In other words, he remembers, he reflects on his past. Yes, I know Philippians 3 tells us to forget the past, but I'm saying forget the evil of the past, forget those things that hinder us, but it is important for us as men to be the tribal storytellers. I love a story of a missionary in the 1960s. They brought light into this little African village, and each hut got one light bulb on the table. And the missionaries, however, when they equipped these villages with light, they did not tell them what the light was for. So every night, as the sun went down, the villagers would go to their individual huts and stare at this glowing light bulb. Before that event happened, they would go to the tribal fire pit, have a bonfire, and they would spend every evening sharing the tribal stories. And the tribal stories were crucified on the altar of staring into a glowing lamp. Does that sound familiar today? We've lost the art, guys, of storytelling. Your job is to be the tribal storyteller in your family. Man, my kids, my boys and I, they're in their late 20s, early 30s. We sit around often in the duck blind or wherever we are, and we just reflect, and they ask me story after story. So I'm giving them wisdom, and I'm giving them the family history, and they're getting to gain that knowledge and pass that on and to see a deep and rich history. So tribal storytelling. Become your family's storyteller, remembering the past. In verse 5, Job reflects again, "When the Almighty was yet with me," and listen to this, guys, "and my children were around me." The third mark of the man in Job 29 is he is an engager. He stays close to his kids. I like to call this the rubber band man. He puts an invisible rubber band over his kids and he lets them have it, but he's always on some intangible level connected. This is why I'm not a fan of men leaving their state because they don't agree with the politics and going somewhere where they have no family. I believe that it's our job as husbands to stay close to our kids, even in adulthood. They need help with their children, your grandchildren. They need encouragement. They need support. I think it's really, really important, guys, that we do not flee because of politics or for whatever reason, but that we stay close to our kids. Even Jesus never ventured more than 80 miles from the place of his birth. So let's look at number 4. Number 4 is found in Job chapter 29, verses 6 through 11. Listen to this. "When my steps were bathed in butter, and the rock poured out for me streams of oil. When I went out to the gate of the city, when I took my seat in the square, the young men saw me and hid themselves, and the old men arose and stood. The princes stopped talking and put their hands over their mouths. The voice of the nobles was hushed, and their tongue stuck on their palate. For when the ear heard, it called me blessed, and when the eye saw, it gave witness to me. Do you know what this is? This is the silencer. This is the man of respect. Number 4 in the marked men of Job 29 is become a man of respect. You know, you look at this passage, there are guys in the city who had better titles, higher titles, but it is not the title, it's not positional leadership that matters to masculinity. It's the man who has earned his respect. Become the man who earns the respect of other men. Become a man who is worthy of respect. Let's move down to verse 12. Job says, here's why. Here's one of the reasons why he was respected. Because I delivered the poor who cried for help and the orphan who had no helper. I was a father to the needy. So marked man, so the fifth aspect, the fifth trait of the marked man in Job chapter 29 is he is an adopter. He's an adopter. In other words, he's a father to the fatherless. We live in a world today where 50% of marriages end in divorce. We live in a world today where 40% of children are born out of wedlock. We live in a world today where 50% of children will not live with their biologic father through age 18. We live in an era of fatherlessness, and we need men to step up and coach that soccer team and coach that softball team and be involved in the band practice and be involved over here at the kids outdoor zone, starting a group for boys. We need guys who mentor other young boys and teach them what it means to be a man. We need men to be father to the fatherless. Verse 13 says this, Job says, the blessing of the one ready to perish came upon me, and I made the widow's heart sing for joy. Why is that? Verse 14, I put on righteousness, and it clothed me. My justice was like a robe and a turban. I was eyes to the blind and feet for the lame. What he's saying here is this. All of these people, the blind person, the lame person, the person who is a widow, these are all elements in life that a person cannot control. Blindness, deafness, being a widow. These are situations, storms in life have heaped their waves over a person, and so they are hurting for things that they did not cause. And when I read this, I think of a man who I would call the withholder. This is a man of mercy. So I use an acrostic for mercy. It's kind of fun. Man's expected, reaping, canceled, yippee, because man, when somebody cancels something, you jump for joy. So mercy in this situation is Paul is coming alongside of these people, and he's embracing them in their suffering. He's administering compassion in their lives. This leads me to the number 7th trait of the man marked for Jesus in Job 29. Verse 16 says, I was a father to the needy, and I investigated a case which I did not know. Listen to this. I broke the jaws of the wicked and snatched the prey from his teeth. What he's saying here is he was an enforcer. He was a man of justice. I think every real man needs to have a cause that they care deeply about. They need to have what I would say a Popeye moment where they say, hey, you know what? I cannot stand this anymore, and I have to get engaged. There are so many causes in this world that are worth dying for. Joyful is the man who finds the sword he will one day fall on and the hill he's willing to die on. Verse 18 says this, then I thought, I shall die in my nest, and I shall multiply my days as the sand. My root is spread out to the waters, and the dew lies all night long on my branch. In other words, what he's saying here, he's an investor. He had sunk deep roots in his community. And if I'm really honest with you, I'm very troubled in the state of vocational pastoral ministry and how pastors pull up roots and move so often. We spent the first 14 years of our ministry in the community of Los Osos and Morro Bay, California. I spent the last 24 years in the community of McMinnville, Oregon, and Yamhill County. I believe in sinking deep roots. I believe this is a biblical principle. I believe that God does not call a man who's in ministry to leave every 2 years. I don't believe that's from God. I believe that's from that man. Invest in your community, sink deep roots. And I want to end with number 9 today of the mark of a man from Job 29. This starts in verse 20. Job says, "My glory is ever new with me, and my bow is renewed in my hand. To me they listened and waited, and kept silent for my counsel. After my words they did not speak again, and my speech dropped on them." I love that. Even back then, you could drop something on somebody. So, "and my speech dropped on them. They waited for me as for the rain, and opened their mouth as for the spring rain. I smiled on them when they did not believe, and the light of my face they did not cast down. I chose a way for them, and sat as chief, and dwelt as a king among the troops, as one who comforted the mourners." What's he saying here? He's saying he was an advisor. He was seen as a man of wisdom. And this compounds from 1 to 8 and now to 9. If you want to be seen as a man of wisdom, you have to stay close to your kids. You have to have deep roots. You have to be a man who's worthy of respect. You have to do all of the previous 8 to become this man that people come to for wise counsel. Guys, I hope this helped you today. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you connect with us through our various avenues and social media outlets. Until next time, feel the wet sand on the arena floor, hear the deafening roar of the crowd, taste the sweetness of victory, smell the stench of battle, get in the game, get dirty, grind it out, read Job 29, and be a man.